Okay, my friends, this is the paper from Yale University. This is September of 2016. They agreed with my research that there was soft-bodied creatures exceptionally preserved because of the oceans that surrounded the whole Earth, and there's one single thin layer of creatures that there's nothing like them today. And I will show you these creatures, and some of them were giants. That's what caused the problem I had with Yale. And I can prove they're giants. There's a hair follicle from a giant. That's a hair follicle. You say, oh no, Roger, that can't be a hair follicle. I say, yes, it can. And additionally, I had this DNA tested, and I had two others which were giant humans. I don't know what this is. I had no DNA on this, but this is a hair follicle. Let me show you this. All right, there's the hair follicle right there. That right there is what they call the erector pili muscle. That's where, right there, it's stuck right in there. That makes your hair go up and down like that. Now, this little bulbous looking thing here is the sebaceous gland. That, of course, is the hair shaft coming up the top. This is the root, and those are the two dots at the bottom, which are the vein and artery. This is nucleophilic substitution. They don't understand this either. Nobody understands how these fossils occurred, but they're there, and they agree they're there, exactly as I said. And the reason they're all flat on one side is because of a great flood and they all died laying flat like this. And they disassociated from the flesh because of the phospholipid membranes. I understand all of this. I understand the chemistry. It's all got to do with collagens and aluminum silicates, which is feldspar. That's all. This is all feldspar. And this is a goose. And you say, oh, that's not a goose, it's just a rock. No, it isn't. There's his feathers right there. There's the feather pattern. And he died flat too. It's like this, they all did, because there was a worldwide flood. And they agree the same thing. They say one worldwide flood, ocean, everywhere on Earth. So it's completely covered with this stuff. Let me show you the paper. See, this is from 2016. They're making a big announcement about this theory, cementing it, which means cementing these creatures in this, I call them mud fossils, because that's how I proposed it to him, to Derek Briggs. I said, these are mud fossils. They were preserved in exactly the way they basically claim, only they say that we don't understand it. I understand it exactly. All right, listen to this carefully. These animals that they found, many of them are outright bizarre in appearance and do not resemble any organism alive today, said Lydia Terhan, a postdoctoral fellow at Yale and first author of the study. We would like to understand their relationship to the complex animals that evolved shortly thereafter, because there's nothing like them today. Are the Ediacara organisms some sort of failed evolutionary experiment, or do they include the ancestors of the animals that subsequently colonized the oceans? Guess what? They are a failed evolutionary experiment. They were wiped off of the face of the earth by the Great Flood, just like it's stated in the ancient texts. Velikovsky, my hero, and I wrote a book about him because I was so destroyed by academia. He did all the research, and he said 3,500 years ago there was almost an impact into Earth by a fiery comet. It's all written about in history, and that created a hot water global flood. And I'll explain to you exactly what happened, because I understand the chemistry, I understand the impact of the atmosphere crushing the oxygens and hydrogens together, creating literally boiling hot water raining. So these things were literally cooked out of their bodies, and the heat changed the phospholipids into aluminum silicates, which is feldspar. Yale needs to go to school. They need to go to school. And they're making all these statements, charging tons of money, and refuse to engage with what I presented. And I have all the evidence. Now, let me show you the DNA, the CAT scans, the whole 9 yards. So I forgot to tell you, this is the other thing I told them. I said, this happened like almost overnight because of this great flood. Now, listen to what they say. What the researchers realized, they said, was that oceans, now this is always, because there's always water everywhere. oceans during the time of the Ediacara biota were much richer in dissolved silica than they are today. And the only reason is because they were heated and all of the bodies created it from the aluminum silicates, from the phospholipids down into aluminum silicates. Now listen to this. This is what I told them. It enabled the transformation of these, they say loose sand around the animals, which is mud, turned them into rock, to occur over a matter of hours or years rather than the usual time frame of thousands to millions of years. They completely validated everything I said about the mud fossils. And they are the creatures that were the giants and all of that stuff that was talked about in the past. They were wiped off the face of the earth because they were a failed genetic experiment. All right, this is the guy that did all the work, is Immanuel Velikovsky. He wrote Worlds in Collision. I wrote Minds in Collision. My book was Mud Fossils and Velikovsky and Minds in Collision. This was published a year before Yale took credit for my work. They never mentioned my name about it, and I gave them all of that information, and because they were giants. That's what it was. Now this right here is a human-sized lung, just like ours. And it is a lung, and it was DNA tested and CAT scanned and all that stuff. And there's a lung, and anybody that is a doctor, and I've had it looked at by anatomists, and there's no question, it's a lung. Now, this is a lung too. And this one here, the pleura, which is the fascia, the rubber bag really that coats your lung, was gone. And it came down to this, which is all these little holes. You see them? These are the alveoli. That's these here. And they've just filled in with silicates. That's why they say silica-rich oceans. Yes. There was all kind, and they came down from phospholipids. You see this? They don't understand chemistry. Phosphorus is up here, and that's what the membranes are made out of. Membranes are the coatings, they're the collagens. When they boil down to aluminum and silicates. Aluminum silicates with all kinds of inclusions of other things. But primarily, every feldspar, 100% of feldspar is aluminum silicates. And then they have some other little bit of this and magnesium, that, and so forth. All right, I'm going to show you something else I found. This is all on my property, 20 miles away from Yale. This was a hand, and it's a left human hand. All right, here it is right here. Now, if you take your left hand and splay it back just like that, you'll have this tendon running right down there. The thumb goes off to this direction. It's broken off up here, and I have the knuckles, some of them, and I have fingertips. This was CAT scan, DNA tested. It's human. This is the pad that runs around, right around here, and that's the cleave mark right there that cuts in between your two pads. Now, you see this silvery stuff? You see that silvery stuff just flaking off of there like it's painted on there? That's grip skin. That's the thick, tough skin on your hands. And I also had another bigger one than this. This is about, I think it was 3 or 4 feet wide. I don't know. This goes back 10, 15 years. And, 13 years or so. And it is what it is. Now, like I say, I have the fingertips and I have some knuckles. Well, let me show you what I have. The fingertip was CAT scanned, DNA tested. Now, if you looked at that, you'd say, oh, it's just a rock. Well, no, it's not. And this cut here is where the tendon's in place. And there's an apical tuft that goes here. I have one that's all eroded out. I can show you. And this is where the bone and the two tendons in place. I broke this piece off in here to get up into the blood supply just to take a look at it. Now, this, again, is the fingertip from that hand. And it's, I don't know, whatever, 6 or 7 inches long. So I don't know exactly how big that guy would be. I think I calculated 60, 70 feet tall, something like that. And hold on, let me get the knuckle. So we saw the fingertip, and I'm going to show you a knuckle, then I'll show you the CAT scans. All right, again, everything was in the flood. This side is flat as a pancake, just like I showed you that lung, laying there flat like this. And it eroded in such a manner as that this is the bone ball. All right, so that's the knuckle bone ball. And this is all the skin and the flesh and all that stuff that surrounded it. But on the other side, you can actually see the muscle. Watch this. We go to the other side of the bone ball, which is here, and you can actually see the weave of the muscle. You see it? That's the weave of the muscle. This right here, this is what your finger is here, like that. Well, it's one of the middle ones. And it had a stalk coming this way, which is the tendon that makes it go this way and that way. And then it had one coming over here this way that eroded completely off. So you see the ball or the bone. Over here, you don't see the bone. It's under there. It's under there, but you don't see it because the tendon is coming down. You see the little dot at the end of the tendon? That's the stalk of the tendon. And that would run right down like right down here. And this is that. It's that flat. Because it died looking like this. Everything eroded off. So this turned to almost like completely mud. Alright? The bone is a little bit different. You see the bone, the structure of the bone right around here? That's got a different mineralization into it. Here you're into the marrow of the bone, very bloody and wet. Anyway, so this was the finger, right here. This is the fingertip down the other end. And I have other parts from this. I have a bunch of stuff from that. And there's more stuff laying out there. I finally I just gave up. I have so much stuff here, I don't know what I'm going to ever do with it. Let me show you the bigger one. This is not even big. All right, I measured it here. It's about 7 inches actual, maybe a little smidge more, but some of it's eroded off here and at the other end. You know, I mean all the fleshy bits. So figure 8 inches. Now, I'm almost 6 feet tall. So if you take 6, and I'm 1 inch on my thumb. So 8 times 6 feet is like 6/8 or 48. So I'm about 5'10". So let's go with 45 feet. So this thing would have been about 45 feet tall. That's not bad, but wait till you see the next one. And I'm going to show you the CAT scans first, where the fingernail bed was, and where the arteries and the veins were, and the tendons. Because these CAT scans were done by Jesse Grant and Associates. Absolutely fabulous. Because you don't have much to work with. This is mostly completely invaded. Completely invaded. It's nucleophilic substitution and nucleophilic invasion. So whatever was there is gone. At some points, this one was a mud fossil. Other ones, hold on a second. Some of them came out just like they were today. You see that? This is literally a piece of meat. And down at the very tip here is where this attaches to the next organ or the next thing. That's a flap. That they still don't know about this. These are on all the organs, like this here. You see that? Whatever this was has to latch into something else so it holds itself in the body. And all of the stuff has it. The lungs have it too. They have one here, the latch right there. They all have a latch to it. And like that's the top of the lung on this one. Of course, this was a DNA tested in CAT scan. I have the DNA tests on the 3 of them I had done. Now, I showed you the big hand. The hand here, right there. All right, and of course the fingers and the knuckles and all that. Now, here's the CAT scans, which, again, it's hard to get a good CAT scan. So the surface scan is the best because inside it's pretty much transitioned. But here you can see on the very end, you see that? That's this right here. This is where the bone was. Again, I broke this piece off. It was here when it got CAT scanned years ago. This goes back to 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. Now, this side, that's the vein side, and that is, you don't see it just looking at it, but here it's just quite as obvious as can be. And you can see the hole right here, which was where the vein was. So that tendon goes up so you can do all that stuff with your thumb. That tendon there is the artery side, and that's why there's no darkness to it. The red blood just basically runs right out, and then of course this is the bone. Now, that is a surface scan from the back. The top scan shows where the fingernail was. Let me see if I can find that one. Here. You see, this is the top scan. That's where the fingernail actually was, right there. You see? And that little cut is where tendons lock in. You see, very, very specific. It's not by an accident. And they all have them. I found them on other ones just as well. And anyway, it's a hand. Of that there is no question. And DNA tested. And obviously you just saw the CAT scans. Now, let me show you the big one. All right, now check this out. This, as I recall, was approximately, I had it listed as 3 feet long, 36 inches from this very end here to the very other tip of the fingertip. And that is a fingertip. And I can show you very clearly. This is the fingernail. The picture's not real good. This goes back years and years ago. And this, here's what happened. My property was pretty big, and I split it up into 4 lots. And I sold the lot that this fingertip is on. So I don't have that fingertip in my possession anymore. That's gone. It's on the other guy's property. Now, however, when it was on my property, I took a sample off of here and had DNA sent off, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, this was the fingernail. I really couldn't move it, and actually I damaged my shoulder trying to move this thing around. It probably weighed 500-600 pounds. And that right there is the pad that goes right in between your bones. So they rub against that pad. And these, of course, are the blood, artery and vein. And there's a ton of blood in fingertips, absolutely saturated with blood. But you got to get below the lever, because you can't get it off the top. There's nothing there. So I had to break this off of here, and I'll show you that in a second. And there's actually fingerprints on there. Your fingerprints start right up next to your fingernails. All right, I'll show you that. So don't forget now, this is 3 feet long. I'll show you the DNA test. It said excellent quality DNA from that and the lung. The big Mudfossil fingertip had less quality DNA, but it still had it. It wasn't quite as amplified, but it was, all 3 of them tested positive for human DNA, and 2 of them were excellent, just like blood. And I mean, seriously, if I put water on there, which I will, hold on a second. All right, I put a little water on there. We'll look at it back in a second. But this is the fingertip. Now, like I said, I broke a piece off, and here's the piece I broke off, is right here. That's the fingerprint ridges. You see these? It's the same size as my thumb. One ridge. These little dots are the sweat pores. And it's really about this thick. I have it here. Maybe I'll show it to you in a second. But you can't get blood out of it. There's no blood. This is that keratinized stuff, which I showed you just peeled right off of the big hand here. Where is it? You see? That's this stuff here. It's like a rubber pad that coats your hands. They call it grip skin. I call it grip skin. Some people call it friction skin, but it's the stuff you use to grab things and do all the work you have to do with your. Anyway, and it just peels off. So when I broke it off of here, it just popped right off in a scab, like it came off. And here it is, right there. So then I went down in here into the bloody spot of the fingertip and took the blood and sent literally blood. And I'll show you this in a second. You see how red it turned? I got the microscope going because I'm going to be looking at a couple things. So I'll show you in the microscope how red that is. It's just amazing. It's just literally saturated, still flowing blood almost. And again, this wasn't found far from the other one. Now, why one of them got stripped into nothing and this one didn't, I don't know. I can't account for that. And all of this stuff was found on the surface of the Earth, so it's not 550 million years old like Yale is saying. They're talking 550 million years. All this stuff happened one layer, and it was just a failed experiment of nature. Yes, it was. And it was recorded in all the ancient texts, including the Bible. There was a global worldwide flood. Velikovsky claims there was several of them. Now, the 1500 BC one is the one that was a real bad one, I believe, which caused all these mud fossils, and it was from the fiery comet Venus, Venus was ejected from Jupiter. Velikovsky had all that stuff, and they destroyed him. So I wrote this to bring him back into history. I'm telling you, by the time I wrote this book, virtually nobody knew his name. He was going to be just totally washed off the face of the planet. And because all the things he said were so unbelievable that they actually took his books off the bookshelf. They wouldn't allow him to be on the bookshelf because he was saying things they didn't like so much. And the guy had never even read the book, but somebody told him, he said, the guy's talking about giants and gods, and well, if it's there, it's there. And and it is there. I'm telling you right now, these giants are absolutely no question whatsoever. And dragons were here, all that stuff. Gigantic hair follicles, things that are dismissed by the academics and rejected. So the first thing out of Derek Briggs's mouth, basically, when I said I had giants, he said, oh, what are you, some kind of creationist? And they destroyed Mary Schweitzer and Mark Armitage and all of these people that came up with these discoveries because they didn't fit in their box. See, this goes way back. This is about Mary Schweitzer. And she says, I don't care what they say about me. She's a paleontologist. And she was on 60 Minutes, and they just went crazy. And basically, if I was her, I would say they destroyed me because they took her right out of the realm. You never heard her name about any of this stuff. And then you got Mark Armitage, wherever he is, here. They fired him. They fired him for finding the soft tissue. They said Armitage is good. Now he sued him, and he won. But he found this soft tissue in these Triceratops horns. Big deal. I have actually literally blood coming out of these things, and I mean literally blood. So finding soft tissue is not a big deal. So here it is, CBS Los Angeles, lawsuit, CSC Sun scientists fired after soft tissue found on dinosaur fossil. This is in 2014. Now, at the same time, I was going up against Yale. And they were dismissing me one after another, and I kept doing everything they asked to have done. We had a head CAT scan down in University of Texas, Austin, because that's what they said. Oh yeah, that's the only one we do for CAT scans. So I said, all right, we'll take it down there. Well, they didn't want to do it. They were very dismissive about it and nasty, really, to be perfectly honest with you. And it got extremely nasty. So they just dismissed all that and would refuse to talk to me. And I was very upset. And I didn't threaten anybody. I just said, I am not trying to damage anybody's reputation or anything. And apparently they took it as a threat. They had the police call me and say, you're threatening people. I said, I'm not threatening people. And they said, oh, you said you don't want to hurt anybody. I said, no, I don't want to hurt anybody's reputation. That's what I'm saying. I want them to step up and say something. Well, so that's documented, and that's going to go back to 2013, 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. And that'll be in the police department records, I'm sure. So I can verify that. Well, here's the problem. I kept sending emails, and I did this to Harvard and Yale and all of them. I've done this everywhere. Johns Hopkins, and nobody returns the emails. None, zero, not one. And the only one I ever got any responses from was Derek Briggs, and that was after I emailed the president and everybody else. And I said, I'm upset. What are you going to do here? And Derek Briggs just said, I've been looking at your stuff. I've been watching everything you've been doing, and it's all rocks. And then they present that paper. That's what upset me. Taking credit for my work. I don't think that's right at all. And this guy here, Mark Armitage. Now, nobody wants to talk to me because I'm so far out on a limb with dragons and monsters and giants. They're just talking about finding soft tissue. I'm like on another planet, and I'm telling you right now, I am on another planet now, because all of this stuff Velikovsky talked about, that's all factual. If you look at the impact on Mars from Venus, and you look at the impact site on Venus, it's absolutely staggering. I'll show you, because this verifies what Velikovsky said. All right, before I show you some evidence, which they say there is none, this was about Immanuel Velikovsky, Worlds in Collision. I'll tell you exactly what he said in a moment, and it's about Jupiter giving birth to Venus. Now, here's what they have to say. It was a book by Immanuel Velikovsky published in 1950. The book postulates around 1500 BC, the planet Venus was ejected from Jupiter as a fiery comet, a real hot comet-like object, and passed near Earth. An actual collision is not mentioned, and I don't believe there was a collision. The object allegedly changed Earth's orbit and axis, causing innumerable catastrophes mentioned in the early mythologies like the Great Flood and religions from around the world. Now, everybody had the same story. He went to everywhere. So the book has been heavily criticized as a work of pseudoscience, catastrophism. Many of its claims are completely rejected by established scientific community as they are not supported by any available evidence. Well, I have made the evidence, and they will not allow it to be seen. So that's the problem. Okay, we're going to have to start off with new books, and all of these are new books about my research in all the different areas and all the history that we've been denied, and ether theory and electron flood theory and all of the mythology that's just been denied. These are books written by Paul Amatucci, which are pretty much on my research. He has a whole bunch of other books as well. And he's just sort of trying to bring out things that have been squished, which is all my research has been literally crushed. As I showed you, Yale had no... they just denied it, which I don't think they're supposed to be able to do that. I looked up academic fraud, and it says dismissal of unwanted evidence. You know, if there's evidence, they should have to look at it. And anyway, and also taking credit for my work too. So it goes both ways. It's amazing, to be perfectly honest with you.